Our history, wrote the Roman senator Cassius Dio, has now descended from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust. Sound dramatic? It was. If you've ever seen the movie Gladiator, you might remember Joaquin Phoenix playing a twisted, egotistical Roman emperor named Commodus. Guess what? That version might actually be kind compared to the real one. Commodus wasn't just cruel. He was dangerous in a way that feels eerily familiar. A narcissist with absolute power, obsessed with image, attention, and total control. He rebranded an empire to reflect himself, not through good governance, but through spectacle, violence, and vanity. He drained the empire's soul, quite literally bankrupting Rome on all levels. So how did the son of the great philosopher King Marcus Aurelius become the man who turned gold into rust? Let's find out. Commodus was born in 161 AD, the son of Marcus Aurelius, one of the most respected emperors in Roman history. Marcus wrote Meditations, a classic of Stoic philosophy, while managing plagues, wars, and internal strife. And then came Commodus, the first Roman emperor born into power. Instead of being raised in hardship like his father, Commodus grew up in luxury, surrounded by tutors, slaves, and flattery. When Marcus died in 180 AD, the empire was at its peak, stable, vast, and wealthy. What followed, though, was the downfall. Commodus wanted to be a god, a gladiator, and a hero, all at once. He appeared in the arena over 700 times by some counts. Unlike real gladiators, his battles were safe and staged. His human opponents were often disabled, drugged, given faulty weapons, or otherwise incapacitated. The wild animals? Almost always sedated. Everyone in Rome knew this, and secretly ridiculed him for it. But Commodus, convinced he was fooling the world, demanded superstar pay for every rigged appearance. Each of his appearances cost the treasury 1 million sesterces, the rough equivalent of 20 to 30 million US dollars today. To help visualize that, buying a horse in ancient Rome could cost about 1,000 sesterces, much like buying a car today. So Commodus demanded the price of 1,000 cars for every staged fight. A Roman soldier earned around 900 sesterces per year, meaning one of these fights cost more than 1,000 soldiers' annual salaries. He didn't stop there. Commodus imported exotic beasts from across the empire, lions, elephants, ostriches, just to slaughter them in front of cheering crowds. The logistics alone cost a fortune. Specialized ships, handlers, soldiers, and supply chains from North Africa and the Near East. The message was clear. Rome's power and wealth existed to glorify Commodus. But this wasn't just a financial black hole. It was a symbolic implosion. Every time Commodus stepped into the arena, he wasn't merely bleeding the treasury, he was degrading the imperial office. Emperors were expected to uphold Roman dignity, not to mimic slaves and criminals. By demanding to be worshipped as Hercules reborn and engaging in farcical battles, Commodus shattered the moral and cultural capital of Rome's leadership. These weren't isolated events. This was a full-blown imperial campaign of mass killing, staged violence, and godlike pageantry. The costs extended beyond coins. Imperial infrastructure was repurposed for spectacle, ships carried animals instead of supplies, troops guarded amphitheaters instead of borders. Entire departments were roped into the business of keeping Commodus entertained. Commodus didn't just believe he was a god. He made the Roman world pay for that belief. One monument, one coin, and one bureaucratic edict at a time. By 192 AD, Commodus declared himself the new Romulus and refounded the Eternal City under a new name, Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana, the colony of Lucius Annius Commodus. Not satisfied with owning Rome, he renamed the months of the year after himself. Amazonius, Invictus, Felix, Pius, Lucius, Aelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Herculeus, Romanus, and Exuperatorius. The military became the Commodianae legions, the grain fleet from Africa, Rome's crucial supply chain that brought grain from the port city of Alexandria in Egypt, was renamed Alexandria Commodiana Togata, the Alexandria fleet in Commodus's toga. The Senate was renamed the Commodian Fortunate Senate. Even his palace, the dates of his decrees, and the people of Rome were rebranded Commodianus, or Commodian. Through these sweeping changes, Commodus didn't just want to rule Rome, He wanted to be Rome. This wasn't administration, it was imperial branding, self-worship carved into the structure of the state, and it came with a staggering price tag. Reminting coins, renaming cities and institutions, commissioning new inscriptions, and enforcing bureaucratic changes across the empire all drained resources. Commodus's ego didn't just rewrite Rome's identity, it also emptied its treasury. Commodus's court was less a government and more his personal playground. He surrounded himself with hundreds of mistresses and indulged in relentless sexual excess and cruelty. Orgiastic feasts and wild, violent fantasies were routine, and the elite norms of Rome became his mockery. Senators were often humiliated, sometimes sexually, to satisfy Commodus's twisted desires. Those who displeased him, including partners and servants, were reportedly executed on a whim. Rome transformed into his own pleasure palace, a court ruled by caprice and chaos. This wasn't just decadence, it was a sign of an emperor utterly unhinged, who weaponized excess and fear to dominate his world. Commodus distrusted Rome's elites. Maybe with good reason. They despised him. But instead of reforming the Senate, he emptied it. Literally. He ordered executions of dozens of senators, including some of the 40 handpicked by his father to advise him. Legend says only one survived him. And their replacements? Not elected, not appointed, bought. Seats in the Senate were no more earned through ability or service. They were now sold to the highest bidder. That not only eroded governance, but deeply corrupted Roman law and administration. Even taxes were manipulated. Commodus reportedly raised taxes on the senatorial class while rewarding his favorites and inner circle, further straining Rome's political balance. While these purges and confiscations may have briefly refilled the treasury, it was a short-term gain. The more senators he eliminated, the fewer remained to pay the taxes he so desperately needed. It was a self-defeating cycle. Despite all this, Commodus didn't wage major wars. That should have saved money, right? Not quite. While Rome wasn't paying for war, it was paying for ego, and the damage was immense. Instead of securing the borders, Commodus chose to pay off frontier tribes through bribes, gifts to allies, and tax-free trade privileges. These payments looked like diplomacy, but often felt more like appeasement or ransom. And while these peace deals were cheaper than war in the short term, they encouraged dependence, future demands, and quiet instability. Meanwhile, Rome's legions sat idle. Resources once used for defense were rerouted to stage Commodus's spectacles. Rome under Commodus fought no wars, but the empire still bled, not on the frontiers but from within. The legions were idle, their commanders corrupted, and the treasury emptied not by conquest, but by ego. To the common soldier, he was tolerable, sometimes even popular. They got paid and avoided war. But the military elite saw through it, the bribes, the corruption, the neglect of logistics. With Commodus, historians mark the symbolic end of Pax Romana, the 2-century-long golden age of Roman peace and prosperity. This era, which began with Emperor Augustus, was marked by relative peace, stable governance, economic expansion, and the flourishing of Roman culture and infrastructure. There were still conflicts, but Rome largely avoided large-scale civil wars or invasions, and its vast network of roads, laws, and trade routes allowed the empire to thrive. Commodus didn't start a war, but by undermining Rome's internal systems and draining its resources, he helped bring this golden chapter to a close. Marcus Aurelius closed that era as a philosopher king. Commodus opened a new chapter defined by excess, instability, and fear. The empire didn't fall under Commodus, but it tilted. When he came to power in 180 CE, the delicate balance that depended on strong, disciplined emperors was broken. His rule is seen as the beginning of Rome's long decline, precisely because he preserved peace not through strength, but through neglect, spectacle, bribes, and fear. The Pax Romana died not in war, but in the arena. Commodus ruled alone for 12 years, long for a Roman emperor. But his death in 192 AD was just as theatrical as his life. He was strangled in his bath by a wrestler, a final violent curtain call orchestrated by his own inner circle, who feared what fresh madness his next decree might unleash. But Commodus's death didn't bring peace. What followed was chaos, a bloody scramble for power, civil war, and an empire stumbling into instability. The Gladiator Emperor fell, and Rome would never be the same again. Commodus was so hated by the elite that after his assassination, the Senate formally condemned his memory with a damnatio memoriae, a decree to erase him from history. His statues were destroyed or defaced, his name scrubbed from public records, and his legacy buried beneath official silence. He renamed Rome after himself, and after his death, Rome made sure to erase him from it. But Commodus's imprint was too large to vanish entirely. Coins bearing his image still circulate in museums. Some inscriptions and documents escaped destruction. Popular stories, gossip, and unofficial histories preserved his memory, mostly as a warning of what happens when power becomes madness. Despite the Senate's best efforts, Commodus remains one of the most notorious emperors remembered from ancient Rome. The attempt to erase him only made his excesses more infamous. And memory doesn't stay buried. In pop culture, Commodus lives on. Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal in Gladiator wasn't historically precise, but it captured something real: the insecurity, the cruelty, the unshakable ego. Maybe that's why Commodus resonates with modern audiences, and why his story matters now. He reminds us how absolute power, when mixed with unchecked ego, can hollow out even the mightiest civilization, turning leadership into performance, empire into spectacle, and gold into rust.